What's happening?
What is going on?
A
I
special
am
edition of the DC Deep Dive. That's what's going on.
exactly special live edition, and to say that this is special really does not do the definition of the word special it's due because this is really
Penultimate.
really special. Exactly, exactly. Um, so we are going to talk with Jeremy Adams. We will get to him in just a moment. Before we get started, though, just take a little gander at this. So let's get all this stuff out of the way first. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you like. Make sure you comment. Make sure you comment in the chat because you'll have an opportunity to ask Jeremy some questions as well. And so, without further ado, let's bring in the man himself. It is Mr. Jeremy Adams. What's going on, Jeremy?
Woo!
What is
Right
happening?
on.
How are you?
I'm always good. I had a busy
You're-
weekend.
Well, definitely appreciate you coming back to speak with us again.
Yeah, no, I'm thrilled, man. I think last time it was just Flash, so now it's Flash and Green Lantern.
Yeah, we
Exactly.
talked a
It'll
little
be
bit
everything.
about
I'm just kidding.
we talked a little bit about Flashpoint Beyond too. I was trying to milk you
Right.
for information on that.
Yeah, that's right. That feels like a generation ago.
You did really well. You gave nothing away. But having read that was an incredible series, Flashpoint
Well,
Beyond. It was
thank you. I mean, that was. It's funny because that was going on concurrently with Dark Crisis over
Right.
here, and then Flashpoint Beyond was over here, and obviously Flashpoint Beyond, even some of the, especially in the book, a lot of the current stuff that was happening was feeding into Jeff's Stargirl and Jeff's run on JSA, which I think even that stuff, goes further back. I feel like Jeff's been telling a particular story, for a long time.
Yeah, that goes back to the first Flashpoint. Like he's
Yeah.
touching on all of his major bodies of work in the past decade with that.
Yeah,
It's pretty wild.
it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty cool, man. Like I'm still kind of like, hey, I sent Jeff a copy of Green Lantern #1, and the fact that I can send Jeff Johns a copy of Green Lantern, you know what I mean? It's like what?
How nerve wracking was that to send Jeff Johns a copy of Green Lantern #1?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird thing because I don't think he likes the fact that I loved reading his comics. You know what I mean? Like I think he's weirded about it too, and I totally get it because I'm such a fanboy in some ways that I still have to somehow retain oh yeah, we're colleagues, and at the same time I'm like screaming all the time.
Well, that's one of the things. I mean, we're coming up on Flash 800, right? And it's you, it's Joshua, it's Mark Waid, it's Jeff John. I mean, you're there with probably three of the largest names that have written the Flash in the past 40 years, right?
I mean, what's crazy
And
is
you're part of that now.
I mean, it's weird to think that, you know what I mean? Like, I think I'm a very small part, but I'm really grateful to be a part. I definitely, it was months ago. It was probably in September, and I said, hey, what are our plans for issue 800? I really would love to get Mark and Josh and Jeff, and I got a lot of we can never do that. I'm like, no, I know all of them now. I'm gonna pester them until they say yes, But I didn't have to pester them. They were all totally on board, which is listen, it's crazy. It's crazy to me as a guy that just started writing comics a couple years ago to be in a book with all those guys in the Flash. And, I mean, you guys know how passionate I was about writing the Flash and how much fun I've had writing the Flash. And it's both sad and, to see, I mean, this is the reality. When I first started, they told me that most people don't get more than a year on a run. That's kind of their thing. I don't know if it was just HBO and Warner Brothers getting sold out all the time that people ignored me for a little bit, and then it was like, oh, okay, and I was sad, but maybe someday I'll get to come back. That's kind of my hope.
It's pretty crazy to just think and imagine that it's It's only been roughly a little bit over a year since you started really in comics, because you've made a huge splash. Like, this run has brought a lot of readers over to Flash. I see people in the chat right now that we know that heard just the ruckus that was like getting passed around by the people reading it, that picked it up and all kinds of stuff. And
I mean, the fans have been like ridiculously wonderful. Any success is really due to those guys like Sharon. They just promoted the heck out of it, and I think they just realized I was just having a lot of fun. I was just trying to be silly and fun, and just a book that it's kind of an old school book. It's like a classic superhero book. I can let my kid read it. I can let an adult read it. Sweet. Oh, good. I hope you dig it. But it's been a thrill. And one of the things that I loved is the thing that I early on when I first started, I did Future State Black Adam. That was the first comic I got to write.
That was out there.
Yeah, totally.
It was out there, bro.
Well, I mean, that was just so bananas. It's like,
it was.
I had a lot of like, this is what it's kind of about, and what, you know, and I'm just like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, and then but then at the end I was like, hey, can I put this character called Gold Beetle in? And they were like, yes. And then I was like, oh no, they let me do this. You know, like they let me create characters, and then I can just use characters from other. And so you see the Flash, it's like immediately I'm just using characters. I'm like, can we go to Gem World? Great, let's go to Gem World. Let's do this. Let's do Dr. Fate. Okay, Gold Beetle's back. Okay, now I want to do a.
Oh my God, that Dr. Fate issue. That was the most interactive comic. I spent a couple hours trying to find that third clue.
Dude,
I'm like, I passed it. Is it really there? I never found it.
It is there, and I will tell you right now. With me, Fernando sent me the art. I couldn't find them. I'm like, where are they? And I had to have him point them out. And in a way, I was like, oh man, this is so good, because that makes it really, you know, juicy for people to go find. But then, like, getting to make intergalactic space wrestlers and, you know, murderers that age backwards. Like,
I like how you was that your decision to include Maul in that issue?
Yes, I was trying to look up just like big DC characters, like big, like just buff guys, you know?
Yeah.
And I had a list, and somebody said, I don't know what they said. It was something about like, oh yeah, anytime we can use Wildcat stuff. And I love, like, I'm a big Wildcats guy too. I'm a big Image guy. When Image hit, I was like, I've got them all, you know. So it's cool.
Thought you're going to retire on buying Image comics. Now you're forced to work for the comic industry. Perfect. Right? Full circle.
Yeah, totally.
So as happy as we are about Flash 800, it's also kind of semi-sad because it's your last issue.
It's right? Totally sad.
Yeah. So I guess I mean, obviously, as a writer, you probably go into it knowing that you're just a steward of these characters, right? You get them for however long, and hopefully you get them for long enough, right? But as a creator, I'm thinking that, especially with what you managed to do with Wally, part of you has to say, I don't want to let this guy go, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely, and it's catch-22, right? Because I got the call saying, hey, you know, we're gonna do some shifts, and they had told me that, like, hey, the book's doing pretty good, but, you know, we're doing this Dawn of DCU, and we're going to do these shifts and stuff. And then they offered me Green Lantern, and I was like, I don't know. Like, I literally, I was so sullen. I was so sullen. It wasn't about sullen about me Green Lantern. In my head, I was like, well, you got to take Green Lantern. But at the same time, I was just like, I was very Eeyore. And then part of what happened was, and then, you know, I had no control over it. You know, and I get it. Like, there are people they're checking everything. But what was great for me was, like, you know, 2 weeks later, 1 Minute War comes out, and you know, it's sold out. And then, like, the second issue sold out, and I was like, well, if you're gonna go,
going out with a bang,
it's not terrible. That it just felt like, just in that moment, it felt like people were catching up to what the fans were saying. And it just felt like, oh, and there's something Josh Williamson really did well in his Flash run, and something I didn't even think about. But if you look at his Flash run, you would see, like, every 4 or 5 issues, he would kind of brand them. You know, it'd be like the Flash War and like this, and it was like, oh, cool. It had an effect of you going like, oh, I want to read this little arc, and I want to read this little arc, and I was You know, I was like, woo, let's go over here. And then I wasn't thinking about that. I was just having like, I was trying to write as much as I could before they did kick me off, you know. And then 1 Minute War, I got to do that, and people just, you know, were having fun with it. And then yeah, we're near the end, and I wish the best of luck to the next guy. You know, I'm always nervous. I'm like, oh, please don't hurt the family.
You know Cy. Have you met Cy yet?
No, not at all.
Are you familiar with his work?
Mm-mm.
This is about to be the most extreme tone shift that has ever occurred in comic books. I like Cy Spurrier. He recently did a Suicide Squad Black Label title, and that's literally his ballpark. So cool. Going from this tonality to Cy, all I could think of as a fan without any kind of knowledge of the inner workings is this has to be related to Dark Terrors. There has to be some kind of
maybe.
Cy does like very like gritty, like
maybe this is what I do know, and this is just because I wish him well and I wish the book well, you know, is that I heard the pitch was really good.
I'm sure it is, but it's going to be dark and gritty, though, is what I'm saying.
I don't know. I mean, all I care about is, you know, that's the weird thing. I didn't create these characters, but I found myself just being like really protective of them, and just because I was writing them, especially the kids, you know what I mean? Like I'm suddenly like just like really, just really, I don't know. I just wanted them, like literally, I think my second thing when they said, hey, we're going to move you off this book, I was like, the kids are going to be okay. like it was like a divorce. Like I was like, no. Like they're going to be okay, right? Like, you know, and it was just I have the total wrong mentality for this business, because I'm totally thinking about it from like, oh, my character, the characters I love, you know.
Right, exactly. Now, did your moving off the book, did that in any way affect the 1 Minute War at all? The story?
No, not 1 Minute War really. The 1 Minute War was always something that I knew was going to tie up a bunch of loose ends in terms of, and you see it in the last issue. It's like,
oh my god, dude.
So like flashback when I first started Flash, and I had said, you know, I immediately said, hey, I really want to kind of retcon what happened in Heroes in Crisis, and this is what I wanted to do. And originally my thought was, because Wally was jumping into bodies, I wanted him to jump into Barry's body, and at that moment realize, holy crap, this is the day that this happened at Sanctuary, and then he, using Barry's body, was going to run and stop it. And I was like, okay. They were like, no, not at all. And I was like, well, can he at least save everybody? And they're like, no. And I'm like, like I was okay, yeah, they told me, and I was like, okay. And in my head, I was like, I'm gonna do it anyways. and so you can see, because even when I said that, like the beginning, like I had that scene with Gold Beetle, and it's literally him going, go back and save everyone.
Yeah, like, so I was going to touch on that, because you mentioned like you wanted to write these story arcs that people can, like the most definitive ones you did was that first volume, right when you took over the title,
right?
And then the 1 Minute War, and that last issue, dude. I'm a Wally West fan, and I'm a fan of good stories above all else. And I literally teared up the moment when you saw Lagoon Boy. I'm like, because I saw him. I'm like, wait a minute. Then I read the bubble. I'm like, oh my, and I've got goosebumps right now just thinking that moment. And the way that she looked at him, like, she's like, you told me to save them all.
Yes, exactly. And literally, I had that moment, and I just knew that there was a lot of upheaval, and I thought, if I can be on here long enough, like the people that told me no will be gone. Like, it's so stupid. And so literally I did that, and they said, okay, but you know, it ended up being one of those happy accidents, because the annual where he talks to Roy and all that stuff happens. I'm like, oh, I think that's really beautiful and stuff. But I was also thinking, like, I have and you see it throughout the run. It's like, okay, there's the Flash Planet, and like, what is the Flash Planet? And I've been seeding all that stuff so that when it's like he gets popped out of time and space because he's a speedster, And I wanted, originally I asked him if I could have a 40 pager on the back end, because I wanted more room. That last issue just felt rushed to me, and I wanted a room. And originally it was like Gold Beetle was like, oh, because in Heroes in Crisis it's really funny because Blue Beetle and Booster Gold just make a clone of Wally, and I thought, oh, it'd be so funny to see them run out and then just see Gold Beetle walk in like in the background and just get a bunch of clones of the bodies and just be dumping them out of gold, like the gold
Oh
box,
my
you
god.
know? And I thought, oh, that'd be hilarious, because she'll just it's like now it becomes, oh no, this is one of the things my family does, you know. And I was having such fun thinking about that and trying to push that forward. And you know, eventually they just let me do this as like, and I knew that scene in particular, the fact that Wally was going to get, you know, destroyed, then wake up at, you know, at the last, and like, where am I, and see all these people that are supposed to be dead, and then introduce and then it's not just them, it's the fact that she went back and got the caveman,
Raptor,
Ugg,
caveman,
and,
the Raptor.
Ugg and Swoosh are their names. And I love that there's a speedster caveman and a speedster raptor running around somewhere, you know. And it's just so like the stuff they let me get away with. And so that was always a big part of my plan, was to, I really wanted to save them. That was always the missing piece to me, that and what I kept pushing forward, what Gold Beetle keeps talking about in the series, and what his daughter talks about in the series, is the idea in my head of what I think Wally ends up becoming. Wally and his family end up becoming. And I don't think I think there's people that live outside of space and time. And I also don't think they worry so much about how it affects the future as much as how does it affect doing the right thing right now? And so they're very Doctor Who in that way. And that's kind of how I've always played that. But yeah, it's interesting. This business is really interesting to me, because my first attempt at like a little arc was the Gem World thing, but that got cut short by an entire issue because I had to cross over with the War for Earth 3. And if you read that issue, you can see things start getting truncated, because I really wanted this final battle between, you know, what is essentially Eclipso and Wally to be a much like grander thing, especially because Fernando was drawing it and he's so good. And that happened a couple times, but this one I really wanted a little more at the end. But it's cool, because to me, 1 Minute War isn't really about the bad guys. I know that sounds terrible, but the bad guys, it's very simple. They're intergalactic imperialists. They're like going to pillage, take what they need, and leave. And they're going to do it before anybody can know. And so their motivations are really directly correlated to that. So I knew that it wasn't going to be about them being these complicated villains, but what it was going to be about was this Flash family. And it was going to be these moments with these characters. And like, why should I even like Liberty Bell? Why should I like, you know, Jay or Wally or Barry or Linda? And that's what I really try to focus on in that. And again, at the end, I've left this character out there in the ether, you know, Admiral Vell, that might be faster than Wally, that is in a, you know, battery pack, spoilers, and maybe he'll be released someday, you know. And then immediately, or before that, I've got intergalactic wrestlers, like I said. So it's crazy.
One of the things that I really enjoy about your writing overall is how relatable your characters are. I think to everyday life. I think one of the things I think that draws people to the Flash, anyway, for me, is how much they can see Wally and their family and themselves and their families. You know, it's like, I mean, just little things like, you know, one of the earliest issues. One of the things that I'll never forget is how excited Wally was that he gets free lunch.
Yeah.
You know, it's the little things that are like that, though. I think that really kind of, you know, resonate with people. You know, yeah, it's great to have fighting and everything, you know, but
Yeah.
it's the human parts. And yeah, you know what? If I was getting a free lunch every day, I'd be excited too.
Dude, listen, all that stuff is pulled from real life. The first time I went to DreamWorks studios out here, they had free lunch, free breakfast, and free lunch, and I kept going like, "What?" Like, yeah, and they were looking at me like I was such a rube. I'm like, I don't understand what you're saying. Like, there's free lunch and free breakfast. I was so kind of bowled over by it, and that also was just like thinking about Mr. Terrific and
Mhm.
and the way that obviously I've been writing Mr. Terrific as Buckaroo Banzai. Like he obviously has this list of like, I have a going list on my desktop of all the things he owns, like, you know, the chip factory and like all the like like potato chips and cereals and streaming services and I just think, man, that he's a super smart guy. So of course he's got all these businesses that are feeding into his main business of, you know, whatever he's doing in the lab or whatever. Yeah.
In like the voices of Barry's kids, I mean, the things that they say, you know, about Wally, and you know, and like, and you know, you know, Dad's gonna kill us if we, you know, if he finds out that we're doing this, and it's like, you know, that's exactly what kids would say. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, and the voices that you put in each of the characters, just I think were pitch perfect.
Well, thank you. You know, I'm a father of a certain age with two
Mhm.
kids, so that part became a little easier, you know, versus like Hal. You know, finding Wally's voice was that first arc, was like trying to figure out in my mind how, like, all these characters in the Flash family and who is Wally and why is Wally a hero, and that was me trying to figure out how to write it. And then I got really comfortable with writing it, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I don't ever want to lose this, you know. And then with Hal, it's a totally different dynamic in a lot of ways, because he doesn't have that family like that.
Mhm.
You know,
Right.
he has family, but you know, it's a little different, and his family is really the core in some ways. But this is, you know, not to get too much in the Green Lantern of it, but
Please get into it.
uh, it is. There were certain aspects that editorial was like, hey, we kind of want this, and I said, all right, but that's not a story. I have to figure out why that makes sense for the character. And then figuring out, if anybody read Jeff Thorne's run, which I think it's kind of a bad rap, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very high concept
Mhm.
sci-fi thing. And it ended, if you remember how it ended, it was like Jon Stewart was almost like a god, and and there's no power battery. There's like the source.
The
And
Guardian.
yeah. And the Guardians are gone. Like, where's the Guardians, right? Like, there's all that stuff that we're just
No,
like,
he's
oh
the Guardian now, and
yeah,
he
he is. And then it's like that source changed some lanterns from different colors, you know. So there's a lot of that's there, and now Hal's on Earth. You know what I mean? And Hal's on Earth, and Sector 2814 is quarantined, and that's kind of the mystery that we'll start uncovering as the series goes on.
Clearly another battery somewhere that no one's ever been told about.
I'm just saying, you don't know, man.
Otherwise, how the hell else would Hal even still have a ring?
I mean, does he? We'll see.
Well, he did in Dark
Yeah.
Crisis when he came back.
Yeah, that's true. So it's also, this is the thing about me, and I think you recognize this, is that I am really trying hard to mind the continuity of DC. And
a big shout out to, like, I know DC went a little bit fast and loose with their continuity especially after New 52, with everything being so tight.
Yeah.
But in the last year, you can see where they are snapping it back in. Like, it is very noticeable, and they're not doing it abruptly. They're like, all right, here's a issue 1051 of Action Comics, put a stamp in it, place it, and now that has put all the Superman books into line. And here's this title, put a stamp in it. I'm like, dude, this is nice. I'm watching it all just piece together so smoothly right at the front of this Dawn of DC thing. I'm like, dude, this is it. I've been telling everybody, jump in now.
Oh, did he freeze?
Got a little bit of a freeze going on there. Well, it is good to hear that he's focusing on the continuity as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
From Esteban, he did throw up a comment. I love how Paul is wearing the Flash shirt with the Flash background, and Mark is wearing a Green Lantern shirt with the Green Lantern background. Was that intentional? No, it actually was not intentional. Let's hit up the chat until he gets unfroze. James Gunn really needs to call Jeremy and Tomasi to work in the writer's room for the DCU. I definitely think that wouldn't be a bad idea. And how we'll come out to your question here as soon as he
Okay.
gets back
He-
here as well.
He's coming back. His power went out. So
Oh, fiddlesticks.
yeah, and
James
we'll
Gunn.
ask him about Larfreeze and Kyle Rayner. So we'll get him back here as soon as we can. So.
Yeah, we're kind of holding it so we got to the Green Lantern stuff. Phil, how are you doing tonight? Yeah, I hope to God we get like fast back to kind of like I don't know, like all comics, they go down a certain road, but then they have to snap back kind of to the status quo to a degree. I hope that's what we do with Hal and the Green Lantern Corps. Because no Corps, no Battery, no Guardians. Everyone just gets a little bit of piece of John Stewart's little space magic. I mean, it's just we're pretty far removed from a Green Lantern story right now, even with the familiar characters.
Yeah.
No, he's popping right back up. Is Bubba asleep? No. Then ask him to turn on something else. Okay.
Yeah, Steve, you didn't miss it, Steve. He lost power, so he's coming back. So
what is going on, Hulk Collector 82? Thank you, Gary.
That's very nice, Adam. Thanks. The one thing that I kind of wish, because I still wish he was writing Flash, obviously, but because in the history of DC Comics, the Flash Green Lantern team ups have been so popular and so ingrained in DC Comics history that I wish that he was able to do it. Maybe he could still do it, but it would have been a lot easier, obviously, if he was writing both of them. So.
Yeah, and also speaking of Flash, as a reminder to everybody in the chat here in just a little bit, we will be doing multiple giveaways. We have a couple volumes of the Flash that he wrote that'll be going out to somebody in the live chat, as well as the movie Battle of the Super Sons, which he wrote, that'll be going out as well. So be sure to stick around for that. And we got him back.
Hello.
I'm sorry. So sorry.
Okay.
We can give you. We sat here and just promoted the giveaway and stuff along the way.
Oh, good.
I was just lamenting the fact that if you were still writing Flash, in the history of DC Comics, a Flash Green Lantern team up is huge. It would have been nice.
It would have been right there. Yeah. What I was going to say about the continuity was when I first started, the continuity was they said everything that happened, like everything matters. It was kind of like that was kind of the thing, and obviously. They've really started kind of like honing in on it, and so all I could say is also so why is Hal on Earth? But more importantly, I get into him and his relationship with Carol, and what is that? I mean, how do you deal with this guy that keeps coming back? Like it's one of those things. And also, the art's unbelievable, but also the backup issue by Philip Kennedy Johnson is just like, it's stupid good.
Oh, I'm big pump for that. I'm a huge Philip Kennedy Johnson fan.
Yeah, me too.
He did for Superman what you did for Wally. Now I'm hoping and praying, hate to cross brand here, but I'm hoping and praying he can do it for the Hulk.
Well,
that's another character I love, and that character
I love the Hulk.
He needs a character.
I'll pick up that Hulk because I was a huge nut for the Hulk with Peter David when Peter David's run was going on back in the day.
I like the Bruce Jones run the best. The Return of the Monster stuff. I
that was cool too. But like the Peter David stuff was crazy. It just went all over the place. Mm-hmm. And it was like, Joe, fix it. Oh no, the Green Hulk's back. Now they're merged. Now they're living
give him bunny slippers.
Yeah. I've done a couple of digital only Marvel stuff, and I have a couple more of those digital ones coming out, and that's been really fun. But I would love to get my hands on some of their characters too.
So with Green Lantern, I mean, this kind of takes you full circle, right? Because one of your first, if not your first, writing job was writing the Green Lantern animated series episode, right?
Yeah. My mentor boss Jim Krieg was on that show, running that show with Giancarlo Volpe, and that was my first job. And I wrote one, and then they asked me to write another one, and that was actually the first time I met Bruce Timm, but like he didn't notice me. You know, and
Right.
Jim had said to me, you can come to the record, but you have to sit in front and you cannot say anything. Like you can say nothing. And I'm like, okay. And we're there. And I remember there was a line in the script and Bruce is like, what is this line? Like, what does it even mean? Like what did the writer mean by this? And I'm sitting there going like, and I hear Jim going like, yeah, I don't know. And I'm thinking, like, is this a test? Is this a test? You know? So I didn't say anything. Now cut to like, I think it's like 8 years later, something. I wrote a movie for Bruce called Batman Soul of the Dragon. And again, but this time we're in the room and I'm the writer, right? But but also they don't necessarily want the writers in the room. And I felt very privileged because Wes Gleason is our voiceover director most of the time, who's great. They've been very kind to let me kind of be part of the process, I should say. And but I was also very careful because Bruce, I could tell he was just staring at me. And there was a moment, and I like raised my hand. I'm like, well, what if we did this? And he goes, that was good. Okay. And I was like, oh wow, all right, great. And then a couple minutes later, I said something else, and he goes, back to being quiet. And I was like,
Oh no. Oh no. And for those that are in the chat that don't know, the Green Lantern animated series show is available to watch on HBO Max if you haven't checked it out.
Yeah, I mean, I got asked if I would like to bring some of those characters, Razor, you know, obviously, or Aya, or their reunion into the book, and I was like, first of all, I thought it had happened before. I'm surprised it hadn't, which makes me think there might be a legal reason it hasn't. But boy, I would love to do it.
And we did have a question about some of the people that potentially could be popping up in the Green Lantern series. We had a question for LaFreeze. Do you have any plans that you can talk on for LaFreeze?
Oh,
and
no, I can't talk about
Kyle Rayner.
You know, the funny thing is I've been getting the Kyle question from the minute I started Flash. You know?
Fans out here.
Well, Kyle's one of those characters too that like there's a certain amount of fandom that he was the guy when they came to age, you know. And I think in my mind, if I'm talking about Kyle Rayner, it's like I think they overpowered him so much that it would be fun to see him not that. But I don't have
the whole Ion phase.
Yeah, they made him Ion, and then they made him the White Lantern.
Yeah. They made him the White Lantern and stuff. And I can't, like, I don't know, like when I think about Kyle, I always think back in the 90s. I always think about who he was back then, you know. So I don't have anything sweet. Yeah, Blue Hope. I'll tell you a story about that in a second. But I mean, Sector 2814 is quarantine, guys. What can I say? You know, there's only Hal right now.
I guess you said it.
Mm-hmm.
So how much research goes into a character before I? Okay, so luckily with me being like a lifelong nerd, I always have a base knowledge. I probably had more knowledge about Green Lantern than I did about Flash going into the book. The Flash, I read some stuff. I knew some stuff, obviously. You know, you just grow up with that stuff and almost by osmosis half the time. But it wasn't a book that I read on the regular as much as I did Green Lantern. I read Jeff Johns when Hal came back, and then Tomasi's Green Lantern Corps. Like those two were so rad to me. They were so good. And I knew a bunch of Hal stuff prior to that. But, you know, the guy that I really loved was Guy Gardner, mainly because of Green Lantern or Justice League International. I freaking loved him. And it's my two favorite comic covers are from Justice League International, where, you know, Guy is crying and Lobo's over him. That was after like a year of making him a pacifist. And then the next issue is him over Lobo saying, I'm back. I was like, yeah, get him, Guy. I see. So the Blue Hope, real fast, and I'll ask you some of your questions. Blue Hope, when I wrote that, it was funny. I got these notes back, and it was the first time really experiencing notes. And one of the notes was from Giancarlo, and it said, you know what we need? We need like a giant earthworm. And I was like, what is he talking about? Like, this is so weird. And Jim was like, it doesn't matter if he tells you, you know, we need to put a talking mustache for Hal Jordan. that's your job. And I was like, okay, cool. All right. I'm learning. I put this thing in. And then the next issue or the next episode I did, it was kind of similar. He's like, oh, I would love some space sharks. I was like, space sharks? Is this guy watching too many documentaries? Like, what's happening? And the funny thing about animation writing is you write it, and then 2 years later, you might see it, And it was like a year and a half later, and it comes out. And darned it if I was like, man, that Earthworm is like so perfect. And it was such a profound lesson to me in animation, especially, that there are other professionals that just know better. They just can see the whole picture. They can see the things that work. And the same thing with Zermanico on Hal Jordan. He will send specific notes on Green Lantern, and he'll say, I don't think this works this way. I think it works this way. And I'm like, I can barely dress myself, dude. Like, yes, whatever you want to do, we're going to do that because, thanks, man. Yeah, me sad too.
Yeah, you got lucky again with a great artist.
I mean, if you could see the stuff he's sending me, it's just like stupid. And he can do emotions. Like one of the things I worried about is kind of the romance stuff or the stuff between Carol and Hal. Like, can you deliver that in terms of the acting on the face? And he absolutely can, because there's so much of, like I said, I think the way I'm playing it a little bit is, what happens when the boyfriend you love comes back into town, and
you have to hide the one you have.
Yeah. And he's also this really, he's great at like everything, like, and Hal's not the guy that will shy away from it. He's the guy that's just like, I mean, he would probably hit on your girlfriend in front of you. Like, I mean, in a respectful way is what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course.
But I do a lot of research. I do a ton of research, a ton of research. And then I thought the Flash continuity was crazy. The Green Lantern continuity is like 1,000% crazier. It's so intense.
You go from having a Flash family to having thousands of lanterns, right?
Yeah,
thousands of lanterns, thousands of reboots,
right.
Versions of where I'm like, oh, I think this thing I'm doing is really original. It's like, oh, it was done 3 times. I'm like, oh, okay, but you try your best.
The reboot is a kind of a hot topic word for me when it comes to DC, because I think it runs so many people off. I actually posted a video today dispelling like the DC reboots all the time kind of thing. But to that point, like when you're having to actually research these characters, is there like a certain point you go back to and you try to like start your research from, like, because you can't go back to the very beginning and just run the entirety of a character. But
challenge accepted.
You just try to spot it.
Honestly, the way I look at it, it's sort of like the Flash. It's even the stuff I put in there, I don't think is technically part of continuity, but it's part of the continuity of the character. And that's kind of how I look at Hal Jordan. I know that if we got specific about things, people would be turned off by it. But like if I brought a character back that was from the first run of it, and he said something like, oh, I've run into that guy before. And it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe not in this continuity, but maybe he did, there's a certain, as the past gets further and further away, I kind of like to play with that gray a little bit. Not a lot of the hard and fast rules, but there's certain things that there's just too many amazing runs of Green Lantern just to ignore it. Even if they rebooted it, I think it would be crazy to ignore it. That's one of the things I loved about, and that's one of the things I did with Wally. But I also loved about when Jeff did Hal. Like he didn't ignore the fact that Hal Jordan turned evil and did this thing.
Right.
No, he did not.
No, it became another cool story, and it launched this entire incredible, world.
The spectrum. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now you start in May, so you start next month, and then after 2 issues, you automatically jump into Night Terrors.
Yeah.
Is that you don't sound thrilled about that?
No, listen, I'm always excited to cross over, but I'm also like, oh man, like
that's what I was going to ask. You're just getting your the run up, and then suddenly you got to jump into a Night Terror. But I was also thinking that if it comes to Night Terrors, Hal Jordan and his whole thing about fear, that might be something that you could really play with, right?
Well, what do you mean about Hal Jordan fear? The fact that he doesn't fear anything?
Oh no, none of he doesn't fear, right? That he's able to overcome his fear.
Oh yes. Well, that's the interesting thing to me. So when
Yeah.
when they first told me, they were like, "Hey, by the way, after 2 issues, we're going to go into Night Terrors," and I was like, "What are Night Terrors?" You know, and I'm texting
You
Josh.
say it like a
Josh,
1920s mobster like that.
yeah. But Josh is like, he's super smart about all this stuff,
Yeah.
and he comes up with all these cool things. And I look at it more of like when I did jump into War for Earth 3 in Flash. I think that was the first time I ever got to cross over with anything, and that
It's still my treadmill.
yeah. But also, like, I'm a huge nerd, so it was like I get to cross over. Like, it was like I didn't do a crossover, and I tried to make it. What was interesting and what people said about it was that it was more of a Flash comic that touched on what was going on than it was the crossover comic. And I'm kind of doing that now because I remember as a kid, and it would be like, oh, it's a crossover. It has nothing to do with the comic I'm reading. I hated that. Like,
Yeah.
I still wanted it to be a part of the comic. So Night Terrors has an aspect of it that allows us to see, and Alex Seguro, who's doing the backup with Sinestro, allows us to see into these characters a little deeper in that moment. And I think that will really play into what happens after that, and it picks up right after issue 2 of Green Lantern. So I try to make it as seamless
right at the beginning there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want it to feel organic to your overall story, right?
Yeah, I didn't want it to just like, that's what at least that's the way that I try to write things. And so, but it also gives me a chance to take a breath and think about issue 3 more. And also, I'm very impatient. So the mystery and stuff that's unraveling with Green Lantern is slower than I would normally do things, because I'm also trying to do something different. I'm new to this, so I just want to try something. I want to write it differently than I write the Flash, and not in a bad way, just a different way, and a little more serious. Like, there's not. It's still funny. I can't help it to be stupid, but it's still funny, but it's a lot of, I don't know how to describe it. I'm like, okay, good. I had to put on my plug. It's still funny and charming and romantic and interesting. The thing that I'm really trying to do is make the constructs interesting. Like interesting ways of using constructs is something I don't ever want to put a punching, a boxing glove in his hand, or I want to just like, oh, like what else can he do? But anyways, it's going to be an interesting season of Green Lantern, and I just find myself wanting to get to it faster, and I have to be like consciously like, no, slow down. We don't have to get to it right away. I'm building up to other things. I'm building up to bigger ideas, and hopefully I can start small and just go big, because one of the things I think that worked really well with the Flash is we started with Wally, brought in Linda, brought in more of Linda, and brought in with the kids, and then the bigger family, and then by the end, I think by the end of my run, it just felt like the Flash family was a lot bigger.
And it felt like they were there the whole time too.
Yeah.
It was so smooth,
and it just felt like in my mind it demands it. Like, oh, I think somebody would pick up, like, what is Max Mercury and Bart? What did they run off into the sunset and do? Like, what's that story? That's a great story. I would love to see Matt
pushing the limits.
Yeah. Like, what's happened with those two? Where are they? They're obviously getting in trouble wherever they are. And like some of these other characters, I want to see. In my last issue of the Flash, I had the Super Kids idea. Like I was like, oh man, I love the idea of having this, because Young Justice is too old. So it's like there's this spot for kid superheroes, and I would freaking love to write that book. So
we have a question. Any interesting new alien? Will you be bringing some
new alien lanterns? No, not necessarily. Not new aliens, maybe, but not new alien lanterns yet.
Do you plan on keeping it more like Hal? I mean, there's Hal, Guy, John, Kyle, probably
it's
immediate.
Be Hal on Earth for a while. I mean, listen, part of the thing was like, we want to do Hal on Earth, and I was like, great, let me make that make sense. because that to me didn't make sense. Just that dictate. I needed to be like, well, why is he on Earth? Why isn't he flying off? Why isn't he doing this, and this? So then it led to more questions, and then I started coming up with what I would like to do. And then, like I said, I think my stuff is going to be very earthbound and interesting, and the intrigue of what's going on there. I think Philip's stuff is it's just
he's got a challenge ahead of him.
Oh, I don't know if he does. Honestly, he's got it handled. I read his first little backup, and I'm like, son of a gun. You know what I mean?
He's damn good.
It's good. It's good. And the promise of it is so good. Yeah, I know. Dude, trust me.
The last time we saw Nort, Tom King had him throwing up.
Yeah, Human Target. It was hilarious. God, that was so funny.
I know when he brought him in, and he's like, yeah, let's, I'm breaking the rules, Yeah. I love Nort so much. I've said for a long time, like, I don't care what they give me. If they give me Nort, I'll do Nort. Like, I will write anything,
So I love the game.
Yeah.
All these kids, it's probably Jeremy.
I love those kids, man. I think they're cool. I think they're super. It's not just those kids like Irie and Jay. It's the fact that Maxine is there too, and Maxine as Animal Man's daughter. And, again, in my head, I've got my own stories about, well, wait, at the end of Animal Man, the Red promised not to touch her again, to Animal Man. Said the Red was like, no. And like, why does she have her powers? I still think all those are great stories to talk about.
And we just saw her not in just your issue, but in Swamp Thing Green Hell that just wrapped up as well. She was.
Oh, I didn't even know that because when I was using her, no one was using her. So that's cool. I'll have to check that out.
Lemire and Mankey, they did a phenomenal 3-issue story.
Oh, wow. I'll have to check that out because, like, right now, I love the dynamic between those three. I had to bring in the Super Sons because I like them a lot as kids.
I had to because I like it. Yeah. Perfect.
Well, because I always just thought, no, like it would be really cool to see all these characters together, So.
But now you've got Granny Goodness with just 2 issues to go, right? Until 800.
Things are getting truncated. So at the end of that with Granny and the piece of the Eternity Mine, and that's going to play out the next 2 issues.
Sad to see.
So you and Mark have something in common. You just went to see Journey, right? This past weekend.
Yeah.
Right?
No, my 9-year-old daughter is like that's her favorite band, and it's probably because they listen to it when I'm playing it all the time, and it became like she's obsessed. So we're like, well, she's turning 10, let's go. And so Toto opened for him, and then Journey was there. And
same show.
He saw them last year in Georgia.
Oh, really?
So.
I didn't know that. I'll have to talk to him. He only lives a couple blocks away.
Yeah.
I think we're going to do a signing. For issue 800, and I think it's going to be Jeff, me, and Mark, which is going to be cool. Yeah, right. And they're all friends, and I'm all friends with them. So Mark's one of those guys that every time we have lunch, I'm just like, gosh, he's
this Mark.
Guy.
Yeah. Just went and seen Journey.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I'm the Mark that just went and seen Journey.
That Mark. Oh, I thought you were talking about Mark Wade.
No, this Mark.
No, when you're done name dropping.
Yeah, no, that's what I said. Journey, and they sounded good, man.
Yeah,
and Toto sounded good. I was like, dang, they sound great.
Yeah, it was a blast. My wife, I hate to go to Atlanta.
Yeah,
I'm here in Augusta, Georgia, and I absolutely hate Atlanta because of the traffic and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And so my wife bought me a Christmas present to go see Journey in Atlanta. Yes. So we sucked it up and went and had an amazing time.
Oh, yeah.
Toto opened for him. It was dope.
Toto was so tight. I was like, oh my goodness, they're good. My daughters were so funny. He's like, these guys are old, but they're pretty great.
They still got it. Beat.
Yeah.
Did you? The other thing I wanted. Did you get to WrestleMania?
No.
I know you were at Friday Night SmackDown before,
I went
right?
to SmackDown, and I went to what was the Saturday one?
The NXT one.
Yes, okay. NXT was bananas. Now listen, I never I went to one wrestling thing when I moved out to LA. We went to Halloween Havoc in Las Vegas.
Okay.
I was working at Blockbuster. My manager was like, "Hey, I got these tickets to Halloween Havoc. Let's go." And I'm like, "All right, what do we? Let's go." And we slept in our car, and I lost tons of money. And
You know what year that was?
it had to be 2000 or 99.
I
Yeah.
was about to say, arguably one of my favorite wrestling matches of all time was Diamond Dallas Page and Goldberg at
Oh
Halloween.
my
Havoc.
gosh, that's awesome. So but like that thing, I dip in and out of wrestling. Like I grew up with it, and then you dip out, and I came back to Attitude Era, and then I was like, okay, and then back and forth. But this guy Jason, who's a ref for the WWE, he had read my flash with the wrestler and saw my promo that I put. I don't know if you saw the promo where I'm dressed up as a character, and I was like, I was legit like, I will wrestle somebody. I've got a custom belt for the multiversal belt made, and I was like, I will wrestle, and he was he loved it, and so we became friendly. And then he was like, hey, I'm coming into town, like, do you want tickets? I'm like, heck yeah. So I had a ball. I mean,
nice.
It was so fun. And the women, I was totally floored by the women wrestlers. They were unbelievable. The acrobatics and stuff they were doing. There's a ladder match on Next that I was sweating. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Like these girls are just mauling each other. It was so rad.
I just recently got back into it from the Attitude Era. I left kind of as that fizzled out, and I got back into it I think like a year and a half ago now, and I got back into it through AEW.
Oh yeah, the Jericho stuff and all that.
Yeah, I found out Sting was still around. I'm like, no, I'll go check it out. And I love the WCW days, like during the Attitude Era. And my buddy told me that this has got the same vibes, and I went and checked it out, and I haven't missed a show or a pay-per-view since.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome. I have a friend that does a bunch of the toys for them, and he's a huge wrestling nut, and that's it. I tell you, after like that weekend where it was just WrestleMania events in LA, it was like SmackDown next, WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2, but I didn't go to the WrestleMania. I mean, that was crazy because that is a huge stadium. And people were shoulder to shoulder in there.
There was like 80,000 people each night, right?
Crazy. But there was that feeling of like, ooh, I want to, and that's why I would love to explore Omega Bam Man a little more because I think doing a DC wrestling group would be hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I
Absolutely.
think like wrestling and comic fans always have a lot of great overlap.
I agree.
All right, you want to do a giveaway, Mark?
Yeah, let's definitely. We'll click it. All right, here, go. There.
All right.
Yeah.
You want to go first?
Sure. Do I have the earlier volume?
You do.
Right,
no, you don't. Sorry, I have the earlier volume. So first we have volume 16, The Flash. This is Blink of an Eye, your first. Your first story arc. Exactly. So let's do hashtag Wally West. Oh, Space Sharks. Sorry. Yeah. Let's do hashtag Space Sharks.
Space Sharks.
Yeah. Put hashtag Space Sharks in the chat.
And it'll be able to pull. I don't know if you've seen one of these before, Jeremy.
No.
If people put that hashtag into the chat, it just picks their names up, and we can just draw from the people in the live chat.
Dude, this is pretty versatile.
It is. Works pretty good. Shout out to the White Shadow, aka Chip Getler, for making such a useful tool for all of us to use.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You said Space Sharks, and that stuck in my head.
Yeah, no, I get it. I would write that show too.
Yeah, there's some words that when you put them side by side, you just don't forget them.
Yeah.
Like space whales too, right?
We were talking about space whales just last night, how they're everywhere these days. From Avatar to Star Wars to Star Trek. There's just space whales everywhere.
So funny.
So while we're waiting for everyone to is there anything that you can tease us about the Green Lantern series coming up without having someone call you tomorrow morning and say, why did you say that?
No, I mean, I think what you'll see is that there's a lot of like I said, there's going to be mystery around the ring and mystery around, and a lot of like what's going on up in space. He doesn't know. That's the biggest hint I can tell you. And just like also Sinestro. Why Sinestro on Earth? You know, last time we saw him was Dark Crisis, I think. And I think he was being controlled by the darkness. And it's like, why is he on Earth? What's that about? And I think there's going to be critical pieces of the puzzle. And I think that's going to lead to a much, much larger story. And that's the thing. I mean, the honest truth is that's the thing I'm nervous about. It's because the larger story is predicated on me getting through the smaller story. And I just don't want, you know, my hope is that people are like, oh, Hal is hitting on Carol again. Like, you know, like let's get to the fighting. It's like, yeah, there'll be fighting. There'll be all that stuff. But I also think that that'll be interesting to try to unravel some of this other cool stuff.
With him being gone for so long, those stories need to be told too. Like the fighting's well and good, but we got to get the character back first.
Right. And I have this crazy idea that I'm just like, it's one of those ideas that I just if I mention it to my editor, I'll get a no. so I'm not gonna, and I'm just gonna put it in and see what happens. And it also goes back to one of your questions where you're like, well, you know, does this count as continuity? It's like, oh, but you know, time is messed up, man. It's gotten all crazy. So who knows? I'm kind of like, let's see. But the thing is,
don't you dare break the continuity, Jeremy. Don't you dare.
I'm not breaking any continuity.
Okay.
I'm trying to make sense of the continuity.
Here we go. If you need any pointers, drawing any lines from A to B, you just let us know.
All right, great.
We can help you out with
and
that.
I'm sure you keep it between.
Hey, I'm one of those continuity hounds. I don't think that it has to make sense, but I love drawing the lines to it.
Me too.
You know, like we talked about with what Johns is doing currently, how you can go back and take lines and draw it from stories over 20 years and see where he's taken this group of stories and he's ran it into this new story. It's just fun. Yeah,
I agree. I like obviously from the Flash, you can see me pulling threads like, oh, I want to pay off those things. There's a lot of stuff I want to pay off. Wait, so here's the thing. Isn't Teen Lantern, now correct me if I'm wrong, but the last time we saw Teen Lantern, she's in a coma.
I think he wants you to pull the plug, bro.
Exactly.
That's dark, man.
All right, y'all ready to see this? We got a couple more to go. Yep. We got all right. So for the Flash volume, Paul's hand, the winner of this.
I'm doing the music for it.
Okay.
It's like
Beckerman. Awesome.
Hey.
Nice.
Fantastic.
That's great. That's cool.
So Beckerman, you're going to need a message, Paul, because that one's in Paul's possession.
All right, then we have the next one. You have the next one, Mark, right?
Mm-hmm.
We also had someone who wanted to know if we will see Atrocitus in the new GL book.
No, not for a while.
Okay.
I'll just be straight up honest.
Appreciate it.
Exactly. You know what?
Wish you would have lied to us and said maybe. I'm just kidding.
I mean, I could do that.
Yeah.
But you know what's going to be funny though is I'm going to say no, and then I'm going to get off this thing, and I'll be thinking, but if I did,
what I did,
what I would do?
It'll start worming its way into my brain. That's how you can incept me by people being like, so.
Yeah, I don't think like, dude, the whole Green Lantern Corps got so vast.
Got big.
So vast. I mean, the whole spectrum and everything. I just think it's one of those like the tortoise and the hare situation. Like, it's better off just to be slow and steady with this right now, because I think stories got so far out there, like, and everything feels so concise and direct right now. Like it would just like, and it's working. It's working so well getting these stories, and people are. I feel like people are rushing back to DC en masse right now. I hear people tell me all the time, because most of the content that I do and most of the stuff that I read, like my pull list is like, God, 85% DC, and that's me being generous to non-DC. But I get people message me all the time, and you've seen a couple of comments in here already where people are jumping in, and I think it's just a perfect time to not be too big with stories and to keep it focused on the character.
Why do you think that is? Because, like, I mean, I read Marvel and DC, and I find but I work for DC, and I do a little bit for Marvel, but I'm not exclusive to either. But as a fan, I find myself reading more DC now.
Oh, I know the answer, and it's very simple. And there's 2 points to it. One, there's better stories at DC right now. That's not a knock on Marvel. Comics have been around for so long; they take turns going
Yeah.
up, down, back and forth all the time. But since a certain time era, the quality of comic books at Marvel have not been as high a priority as they were before a certain time era. And like people are, you can go check where people say like Marvel's just now a proving ground for concept for what we can do in movies. Like they just use it as a target audience thing versus this is something bigger than that means more to that than readers. And also a huge thing is in these modern times, like I grew up in a household where there was comics around me before I even knew it. I was raised in an LCS. My dad's been collecting and reading since the 60s. Paul's been in this hobby reading nonstop for decades. Beckerman, who just won, he's had the same pool list unbroken for 30 years. You know, like some people are just in the hobby. But if you're getting into comics now, you're getting introduced through Disney. 9 times out of 10, people are like, I saw that cool movie. I go look in a shop and I start reading this. And that's what you think is good for a while. And then you slowly start expanding. You get more curious. You grab some indies, you grab some DC. And then you're like, holy crap, that's a huge difference in quality and care in the stories. Yeah. It just is.
I remember when Joe Quesada took over and it was like Marvel Knights. And then from there, it was like that run of comics that went from
Joe Quesada.
Oh my gosh, dude. When his thing of like, I never consumed more books than that era where it went from Civil War to Secret Invasion to World War Hulk. And it was just like boom, boom, boom. It was like everything. I was
insane. You had like Siege during that era.
Oh my gosh. It was like every time one ended, it seamlessly went into something else. Because Civil War, you're like, oh, they're never going to be friends again. And then it's like, oh, well, Skrulls might have invaded. I'm like, wait a second. What?
Yeah.
And then it was like, but by the way, the Hulk's been off planet for an entire year. And I was like, he's what? You go read the Greg Pak stuff and you're like, oh my gosh. And then he's writing that shit back because he's like, well, you know, the Illuminati basically blew up my planet. It was crazy.
Yeah, that was a fantastic era for Marvel, like that late 2010s kind of era.
It was intense. I remember really digging it. And but I will say the other thing is, you know, before I started getting credits in comics or in media, I would go to Comic Cons, especially down here. I would be in line to go into that DC panel, and Dan Didio would be hyping me up for everything. Countdown. I was just like, oh my gosh, he had a
year-long weekly initiatives.
I mean, I was like,
I'm all the way in.
I was so in. There's a picture of like the crowd in Comic Con all have the Court of Owl masks. I'm in there. I'm like sitting next. I got that mask still, man, and I was like, I was fully in. And
so me and my pop sat in a panel with Snyder during like it was within the first 10-15 issues of his Batman run.
Yeah.
And I remember like that's all it was, just fans with questions about the stories just begging for an answer. Like that was such a big event right there. That's just huge. I don't know. I think that DC's finding that kind of stuff again. You look at like the Super Family right now, like people are back into Superman like they should have been this whole time.
Yeah.
You know, and you've done it with the Flash.
Yeah.
Like you're just watching people flood over to that title. Like you said, that the book was selling out. Like, and that's what comics have been missing is that X factor, that spark that just, you're not supposed to be able to explain it, but something about this book just speaks to these individuals and they want more. It's fun. Yeah. It's engaging. There's stakes involved in it.
Totally.
Well, let's
do our second drawing.
And this is for the other volume. This is Eclipse.
Volume 17. Yep.
Going to Comiverse. Tony, congratulations.
All right.
So be sure to hit me on the Instagrams, and I'll get that sent out to you.
The last thing we have is...
Yeah, let's say...
Guys, I had so much fun making that movie.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun watching it. It was incredible.
Oh, thank you. I got in trouble from my daughter for using some bad words in it, but you know, it's all good.
Hey, are any animated things in your future?
Yeah, I have a so I've been doing the animated Mortal Kombat for a while. 1, 2, 3. The last one was Snowblind, which is on HBO Max, which I really liked. And then I have this Johnny Cage one coming out, and it's absolutely certifiable, man, that I was allowed to to write this movie. It is so rough in terms of like it's vulgar and it's very silly and it's very fun, and I honestly cannot believe they let me write it.
You're saying that comparing it to the other ones you did, it's even more over the top.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like the other ones were super violent. This is really super violent too, but this one is like now I know Joel McHale's voice. So it's like I ramped it up to 11 and then Joel took it to 15, and then it's just like it is him. It is like showcasing him in a way that you're just like, I probably out F-bombed Scarface in this movie in a way that
congratulations. I think that From Dusk Till Dawn is one of the record holders. So that's your
man.
Well, I just remember as when I was young, me and my brother, we would like army crawl through the hallway to try to stay under my mom's line of sight from the bed. Yeah. My dad, police officer, he worked nights. So we would army crawl all the way to the other end of the house to like try to watch his R-rated VHSs. And Dusk Till Dawn was one of them. And we were so blown away because we have never heard language like that. So we literally tally marked 97 F words in that movie.
That's great. Johnny Cage Mortal Kombat. Yeah, it's called Mortal Kombat Legends Cage Match. So, it's absolutely, and when the preview drops, I mean, I'm either going to be crucified. Like it's so silly. I love it.
And for those that didn't know that he wrote the two other ones already, right?
There's 3 out. So I did Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge. And then the sequel, which we had to cut like 40 minutes out of that thing, that was called Battle of the Realms. And then we did one that was kind of tangential called Mortal Kombat Legends Snowblind, which was about Kenshi and Sub-Zero.
And these are available to watch on HBO Max as well.
Yeah.
If you're in the chat and you haven't seen these, check them out. They are nuts.
Right. And now for the DC animated, you did Super Sons, you co-wrote Justice Society, right? And you wrote Soul of the Dragon, right?
Soul of the Dragon, yeah. And then I wrote like 5 Lego DC movies.
That's right.
That are really fun. And they're really silly. My kids really love them. There was one, I'm so regretful. I think the first I did a DC Lego Flash movie. And Dwight Schultz, who played Murdoch in A-Team, and he was on. He played the voice of the Reverse Flash, and there was this really great gag that we had to cut where the Reverse Flash is basically better than like he takes care of all the problems on Earth, and so the Justice League is out of work, and so they end up turning the Hall of Justice into the Mall of Justice. I really wish that gag would have gone through, man. It was crazy.
Let me spin this real quick. I know you don't have long left with us. So while this is spinning, I want to say thank you for coming on.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Had a great time.
Thanks for just letting me.
Fantastic. So Couchin, you know how to get a hold of Paul on Instagram. So dude, Jeremy, thank you so much for coming back.
Yeah. Hopefully I'll get another book and then I'll come out again.
We'll see you in another year. Absolutely.
Probably the last thing I want to ask you real quick before you leave. Do you see yourself on more than one title at a time in the future?
I would love to. And one of the things I mentioned when I told everybody, like, I want to do a creator own, everybody's kind of pushing me for it. I'm like nervous about doing a creator own because I feel like comics are expensive to make. And so it's like, oh, do I do a Kickstarter or do I, some people are like, no, you got to get a publisher to help you. And I'm like, yeah, but what is that? How does that work?
Publishers are running Kickstarters nowadays.
I know. Yeah. So I'm kind of like, well, maybe I'll do a Kickstarter and see if I can get enough money to put a book out. Cause I want to try that. And cause I've got a ton of ideas for those. And then, I would love to do multiple books. Doing the 2 books a month, the twice a week, that didn't seem to be a problem with my workload, and it doesn't seem to interfere with animation writing and other stuff going on. So
you are a busy individual.
I got to because they don't pay the bills.
Yeah, kids don't feed themselves, unfortunately. I know the feeling. Well, thank you again for coming, man.
You.
We can't thank you enough. This has been awesome.
I appreciate it, guys. Really do.
All right, take care.
We'll catch you next time.
All right, thanks. Bye.
So yeah, that was definitely a blast. I appreciate everybody coming in, hanging out with us. That was enjoyable, Paul.
Definitely. And again, thanks to everyone that's been in the chat tonight. We appreciate you. Make sure if you want something, make sure you get in touch with myself or Mark. And we will be back with another DC deep dive next Monday. The end of the Revenge of the Gods will be back.
Revenge.
And tonight, in just 2 nights, in just 48 hours, we will be right here on this channel with Guess That Key. With an OG episode. So hopefully you can join us then. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit a comment. So again, thanks everybody for joining. And you are now leaving Sector 2815.